I remember a pivotal moment early on when my wife and I were first dating. And there I am sitting across the table from her, and I've got my cell phone next to me. And I'm tuned into what she's saying, but I'm also mindful of if a client is calling or someone needs me. So half my mind is tuned into her, but I'm also mindful of what the business might need at any given moment. And I still remember that dinner, sitting across the table from her, and suddenly realizing what a bad idea that was. The realization was, like, here I am sitting across from this beautiful, amazing woman who I'm getting to know, who's sharing with me about who she is, and I'm only half tuned into that? What is wrong with me? We talk about all the things we should start doing, but no one ever talks about taking the time to discuss what you should stop doing, the things that don't serve us anymore. And sometimes when we stop doing things, it makes room for the things we want to start doing.
Welcome to the 7 Hats Podcast. My name is Yuval Selik, and I've been on the entrepreneurial roller coaster for over 20 years. I've experienced it all throughout my journey: the grind, burnout, failure, and ultimately, success. The turning point for me was realizing that building a successful company is meaningless if you neglect the other significant areas of your life. So today, I'm inviting you to join me on an adventure through those 7 areas, what I call the 7 Hats. Every week, my guests and I will drop valuable insights and pearls of wisdom, helping, motivating, and inspiring you to get your 7 hats in order and deliver real impact with meaning. So let's get going. Hey there, 7 Hatters. Today, we're diving deep into entrepreneurship, mindset, and scaling with Jeremy Shapiro, a serial entrepreneur, mastermind advocate, and mentor who's been empowering business owners for decades. In this episode, we're focusing on hat number 3, the servant, and hat number 4, the entrepreneur, as we explore how Jeremy went from running IT consulting businesses in high school to launching multi-million-dollar ventures, all while helping entrepreneurs reclaim their time, scale with intention, and design a life that truly matters. From his early days in Boston to moving across the world and back, Jeremy shares game-changing insights on building a business that doesn't run you, the power of masterminds, and why every entrepreneur needs to stop hustling for hustle's sake. So, if you're looking to break free from the founder's curse, build real wealth, and take control of your life, this one's for you. Let's get into it, and let's warmly welcome Jeremy to the 7 Hats. Jeremy, welcome to the 7 Hats.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm excited to be here.
Listen, Jeremy, I'm truly excited to have you here today. Exploring your work, it's clear that you've dedicated your life to empowering entrepreneurs redefine what success looks like, shifting from simply working in their business to truly thriving through the journey. And your journey from launching ventures to becoming a mastermind advocate and mentor has probably been very transformative in so many ways to so many entrepreneurs. But we share a common belief that entrepreneurship isn't just about financial success. It's not about just the prize. It's about reclaiming your time, building freedom, and really creating a life that's aligned with our deepest values and passions, and ultimately, as we speak a lot in the 7 Hats, stepping into fulfillment, right? But today, we're not just talking business. We're diving into what it really means to scale, succeed, and live with intention. And it's really about discovering how we as entrepreneurs can design lives that let us work less, make more, and leave a greater impact. But before we dive into all your wisdom and the strategies, the 7 Hatters, as we call them, they love a good backstory. So let's rewind a bit and get to know Jeremy, the person, the journey, and the pivotal moments that shaped you to who you are today. So Jeremy, where were you born and how was your childhood like?
So I'm originally from the East Coast in the Boston area, and that's typically why I talk fast. So if you're having trouble listening, you can dial that podcast speed down. But no, so born and raised in the East Coast and grew up there. Later on in life, my girlfriend at the time, but wife now, we moved overseas to Europe for a bit. And then from there, we moved out to California. So we've been here in the heart of Silicon Valley now for a bit over 20 years.
And so growing up in Boston, tell me a little bit about your childhood, parents, siblings. How did that go?
I think I had a pretty great childhood. I'm pretty pleased with that. I have a brother, and in fact, he's the one who moved out to California first. And it's really interesting, when you and I, have been talking about sort of, fulfillment versus achievement and, why we do the things we do, family is a big piece of that. And so, if we fast forward a bit, we'll get back to the early childhood stuff later on. At the time when my wife and I were living in Europe, we'd all come back to Boston. My brother had moved to California, and we'd been in Europe, and we all were back in the Boston area for the holidays. And my wife and I are sitting in the car, and we're backing out of the driveway, and we're reflecting on what a great time we had spending time with my brother and, his growing family. He had a 9-month-old daughter at the time. And we're like, this is so great. Like, we love hanging out with them. We should move to California. And there was a pause. And, my wife says, if we were going to do that, like, this is the time in our life to do that. And so we thought about that. And as we went back to Europe, and had some more time there, we started looking at the real estate market out here. And from, 9 time zones away, bought our California home, which I would not recommend doing for any of our listeners. That's not a great way to get into a market. But that's what we did. And so we ended up moving from Europe, bought back into Boston to pick up stuff, and then came out here to California to be closer to, family. And that's something that, sort of a thread and a theme throughout is, being there for family, in this case, physically moving out to be closer to family.
And so obviously you have a close relationship with your brother. What does he do?
Yeah. He's an entrepreneur as well.
Oh yeah. 2 entrepreneurs in the
right.
family.
Well, not just him, my dad as well, it's generational, I'd say.
Really? So tell me about your dad. What did he do? What was his venture?
Yeah, so both my parents were professionally educators, multiple degrees, in terms of, not just master's degrees, my dad, PhDs and all, a lot of formal education to the point of my mom was a teacher her entire career. My dad was a college professor and, worked at universities and all that. So growing up in that environment, education was really important. Unfortunately, education wasn't really my thing. I tried out college. I thought that would be, an interesting way to go. And it was sort of the path we're all put on. Right. Our traditional system is, you go through, school to get you ready for university, to get you ready for the workforce, to be a good employee somewhere. And that was just never who I was. Even, looking back to earlier years in school, I'd always find my own way of doing things. And I was really fortunate often to have teachers who would be supportive of that. Even in high school, the traditional way of going about things didn't really jive with me. But, I had a teacher who let me use the computer lab. And so I was, running businesses out of that lab and able to use that as my own home room. And so I would check myself in every day and get to work on the projects that I found interesting that I wanted to do, and I was able to get credit for that. So it was really great to have that kind of support, even in a traditional school environment. But yeah, partway through university, I had a difficult decision to make. I had, one of my businesses was growing, and I was balancing, 40 hours a week of running my business with the full course load and everything else. And so I took a look at things and, asked that question of, which way do I want to go on this? Both things are demanding of my time, but they can't all get that time. So I made a really difficult choice, and that was to put school on hold and, break that news to my family, but it was just going to be for a semester. Right. I even told my girlfriend at the time, again, my wife now, I told her, I'm like, yeah, it's just, I'm taking a semester off. And she'll tell you that moment I told her that, she already knew, like, oh yeah, he's never going back. When she was right. I still have not gone back. That little bump that I thought was just a little bump in business that, I would take care of and then get back to school was really just, upwards growth from there.
So when you're growing up and you're in high school, what did your parents want from you? I mean, if they're entrepreneurial, did they want that for you? Did they want you to go more professional? What did you want?
Yeah. I mean, in their mind, education's the path, right? You go through your formal education, your advanced education, you get a good job and so on. And I never really saw that, even early on in high school, running my own businesses, I was used to, working with clients and handling billing and sales and, client fulfillment work and everything else. The idea of going and doing all those things for someone else just was never that interesting. So it got to the point, I like to say, despite businesses, early on in youth, right? My first, what I call real businesses were in high school. And for me, I define that meaning, multiple clients, team members beyond just myself, and really building out a business that way. And so I don't think, that was the path they saw from me, but I didn't really see any other option besides, building my own thing.
So you had your own little ventures in high school. What was that one business that you left school for?
So that we were doing, IT consulting work. So we're helping, smaller businesses out with their networks and their hardware and, doing all the preventative maintenance and taking care of, all those, in-office needs. And that, started to dabble into software development. So there was the hardware side, but also the software side as well. And it was really fulfilling and enjoyable work. And, we got to this, this growth inflection point I was sharing earlier. And part of the way you deal with that is you hire. Right. So I had, a team. I had folks who were going on site and doing work for clients. And, sometimes growth isn't always a good thing. When I look back, one point that did not go so great was, I brought on account managers. Right. I thought I'd step back from that and have someone else take care of actually interfacing with the client. And in order to do that, that's a rather, high value role. We were raising our prices. So we brought up prices, we changed our account relationships all sort of at the same time. And I did a really bad job messaging that. We did not communicate that well to clients. And that ruffled some feathers. That caused some problems. Looking back, knowing what I know now, we definitely could have messaged that or ramped it up smoother and done a better job on the handoff. But we were growing. So, we threw bodies at the problem, which sometimes can work. But in this case, it didn't go as well as it could have. But it did give us scalability. It allowed us to, at least for new accounts we were bringing on, bring them into the new system we had in place. And that's really where, a lot of growth can come from, is from not just systems and processes, but obviously the people then to run those systems and processes as well.
And what were the years that this was happening?
This was like 99, 2001, that range.
So that's when the internet boom happened. So then what happened with that business? What ultimately transpired?
So that business did fine, but so we continued to grow and take care of those clients and all. But it was a few years later that we actually were moving to Europe. And so this was in the early days of voice over IP. Like now we all have soft phones and, you take a number and it works digitally wherever, but that was not really a thing at the time. But early on, we've had one of those VoIP boxes, if you recall these things, like you plug an Ethernet cable into one side and a phone cord into the other, and you have your phone wherever. So I got that set up and, I knew we were going to be moving to Europe, which meant any of the in-person work I wouldn't be able to be doing. That was fine. I ended up handing off a bunch of the in-person clients, to another company and, transitioned some clients. Others where it was more all virtual, I was able to continue working with virtually. But by that time, I already had, another business ramping up. And so for all of these, no one really knew that we'd moved overseas. We were off by 6 hours time zone wise, but that didn't get in the way of much. Even while overseas, we had a lot of, press and things going on for some of the new ventures. And, I'd be talking to the media and they'd have no idea I was overseas. And that was fine because it was just a phone call conversation. It didn't really matter where I was. And so that was a really exciting growth time for, one of our other businesses that did not matter where I was. And I actually found being 6 hours ahead of the office was fantastic. We really enjoyed that. Contrast that to, being 3 hours behind once we moved out to California, which was just brutal. Always feeling like you're starting your day behind the eight ball with stuff.
These young entrepreneurs will never understand the fun of Y2K.
Right?
So, all right. So you're where in Europe did you move to?
We moved to Northern Germany.
Northern Germany. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. So you've spent a lot of time traveling, right, in Europe and around the world. You're immersing yourself with different cultures. Mm-hmm. I'm always curious because a lot of folks who are just U.S. born, they stay in the U.S., they have a certain mindset. How has understanding different cultures shaped your entrepreneurial philosophy and maybe even the way you approach life? Because you've seen things that most Americans have not, I'm sure.
Yeah. Growing up, we certainly did not travel much or at all. I didn't get a passport till I was 16, and that was for me to go on an overseas trip. And then I didn't travel again until it was actually for client work when I was around 20 or so. So us moving to Europe was kind of a big deal. For starters, I did not speak German. My wife had been studying, German and English undergrad, and dual majored and, spoke not just fluent German, but 18th century German literature and everything else, right? And here I was trying to learn some of the basics. So I was really jumping into, a different world. And, immersion is fantastic. I learned very quick. I like to say I learned my gym German first, just from being at the gym and, all the words that come with that. So that was exciting, but it was a really great way to jump into things. But in terms of your question on the entrepreneurship side, it was really interesting. I really just took for granted how easy entrepreneurship is here in the States. It wasn't until we were moving there and I had the idea of like expanding my business and like opening an office in Germany that I realized how good we have it, right? So in many places in the world, you don't just hang a shingle and say, I have a business. It's a lot more involved. And so I thought I would just open up a German branch of our company and we'd be off and running to the races. It ends up in many places like Germany, you have to capitalize a business over there and go through a whole lot of paperwork and process just to have a business. So in the case of Germany at the time, at least, you had to effectively put $50,000 or 50,000 euros into an account, which was not your money. You couldn't touch it or use it. It was effectively, government controlled money just to start a business. And a lot of the idea was that if somehow you as a business did something wrong, the government could use that money to then make it right. Right. Whereas here in the States, you go and you start a business and you go out and do something. If there's a problem, there can be a lawsuit and it all gets resolved in the court system. It's really different elsewhere, which, maybe it's not a bad system, but it is certainly different than what we're used to. And so I had no idea what that contrast was like. And so that really made me appreciate so much more just how good we've got it here. Even just in terms of, before we got there, my wife was on a scholarship program. So for her, it was really easy. But I remember when, so for her, her visa was good for the year, right? It was a government program she was on. So she was all set. For me, however, going over there, I knew ahead of time I'd need to show them like, look, I won't be a problem. So, I got a letter from my accountant. I had bank statements. I had tax returns. I had all my paperwork figured out. So when we sat down to convert our tourist visa over, the conversation, would have all the supporting documentation I'd need to show like it's fine for me to be here. So we sit down. I remember looking at, the local magistrate, across the desk from us. And, she's asking me like, okay, so you're working here? I'm like, well, I'm not working here. Like I'm physically here. I've got a laptop, but, my company is in the US and, every month I take out money from my US account and I spend it here in your economy. And she's like, looking at me, remember, this is, over 20 years ago, right? The idea of virtual work was not as common as it is now.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's looking at me and asking like, but you're working here. And I'm like, I am working here, but I could also be in an airplane. I could be anywhere. It doesn't matter where I am. And so then she's like, and you're paying taxes locally here. I'm like, well, no, I'm paying my US state and federal taxes because my company is there, right? All this stuff is happening in the US. And like, this is not at all normal for them. And so she's like, but you're going to pay your taxes here in Europe as well. And I'm like, well, triple taxation doesn't make sense. It's a US entity. I'm just here temporarily. We're traveling quite a bit, right? We're in and out. And so it was this really complex conversation. And, sometimes humor goes a long way because, she's sort of sighing at the difficulty of all this. And remember, my wife and I are just dating at this point. And so this government employee trying to figure out what to do with me sort of sighs. And she's like, everything would be so much easier if you're married, right? Because if we were married, I would just be on the visa and it'd be no problem. And so, I jokingly elbow back and I'm like, well, not everything's easier if you're married. And she laughs and my girlfriend laughs and she laughs. And so we're all laughing. And then she's like, all right, stamp, stamp, stamp. And everything was fine. And it was all good to go. But yeah, we have it so much easier here in terms of entrepreneurship and, starting a business.
And I think a lot of folks don't even realize that. My parents live in Italy and everything from, just getting your lights turned on, let alone, right, having a business and healthcare and all of that is completely different.
Yeah.
Why did you choose Germany? Like you could have went anywhere. Why was Germany the place you decided to stay?
Yeah. So my wife was at university and, as she got into her last year, she sat me down at the start of the school year to have a really difficult conversation. We've been dating for 3 years at this point. And, she sat me down to lay out that there's this really prestigious scholarship that she was interested in pursuing, but it was really competitive and difficult to get. And if she applied for it and if she got it, then she'd be going to Germany to teach there for a year. So like, what should she do? She's probably not going to do it. Right. So I'm listening to all this. I'm like, this sounds so exciting. So my question to her was like, that's amazing. Like, where would we live in Germany? And so she looks at me, sort of cocks her head and she's like, what do you mean? Where would we live? And I'm like, well, if we're going to Germany, like, how does it work? Like, do you know where it'd be? And I don't think she'd realize at that point that like you can do two things. I love the mindset of like, expanding the pie, right? So I saw this as a way for, us to live in Europe together. She could pursue the scholarship and everything else. And so long story short, she applied for a Fulbright scholarship. She of course got the Fulbright scholarship and taught in Germany for the year. And we moved overseas together, and it was a fantastic opportunity for her and for me. And that really instilled very much so for me, this passion for travel and culture and language. And since then, as a family, we love traveling, learning languages, absorbing culture, wherever we go like a sponge. And it's something we've carried forward with our kids in terms of, exchange students and au pairs and all these different things. Like sharing that experience with others as well, I just think is so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Hat number 3 is a big hat. It's relationships with others, and it's all about support, right? I mean, an entrepreneur, we all need support, but an entrepreneur more than most, just because of how difficult it is to start and maintain a business. How was that? I mean, at that point, you weren't married, but you're about to, or you're very serious, you're living together, you're running a business, she's going to school. I'm sure it wasn't easy. And so what was that support system like? And what kind of lessons did you learn from that time period?
Yeah, it's funny, for my wife's family, talking to her family about what I did from a business standpoint, like they never quite got it. And it was cool while we were living in Germany, my wife's parents came to visit us, which for them, like they had to go get passports for this because they never really traveled internationally. So that was a really big step. We helped to, bring others along that journey with us, right? So they came out to visit, and I remember they're sitting in our living room and sitting down across, and we're finally having a good conversation, like just the four of us. And they're like, Jeremy, we finally figured out, we get your business. We understand what it is that you do. And they lay it out. I'm like, yes, like that was my previous business, but like now I have another business, right? And as a serial entrepreneur, like there's always sort of that next thing. And they sort of threw their hands up, like, we just figured out what the last one was. What do you mean that's a different business? So yeah, sometimes as entrepreneurs, we're so caught up, in our community of other entrepreneurs, in our own world of what that life is like, it can be easy to forget that for folks with a 9-to-5, right?
Yeah.
Our friends in our social life who don't quite get what it is, right? Especially, I think it can be easy for friends in our social lives or family to see that proverbial duck floating across the water, right? There we are, living easy street. They see the flexibility we have, the cool things we get to do in life, and they don't see the whirlwind of feet underneath the water to move ourselves, that duck, along. So yeah, it's challenging to find support for what we do outside of the entrepreneurial world, which is why I think it's so important to surround yourself with like-minded individuals who are also on that path, who are also entrepreneurs, who get what it is that you're doing and who can support you along that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there should be a disclaimer, maybe a little pamphlet on the journey ahead for any new entrepreneur, any young budding entrepreneur, so they can understand they are not going to be unique. They are not going to be the 0% who get to the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? Because those are very rare. And there's a huge obstacle from start to finish, wherever that finish is. And a lot of it has to do with getting, punched in the stomach multiple times a day. And if you don't have your health, your mental acuity, your support, right? All of the aspects of what we call the 7 hats, it's so difficult to navigate through that, through that journey. And I'm sure you've seen, you work with many entrepreneurs. What percentage of entrepreneurs do you think, or at least in your view, understand that when they first start? Or how many are just so enamored by the rainbows and unicorns and butterflies that they just jump in and then figure it out the hard way?
It's funny. I think especially as of late, there's this whole idea out there that everyone should have a business. Everyone should have a side hustle. Everyone should be, an entrepreneur. And I actually disagree with that, right? Like entrepreneurship should really be reserved for us select weirdos. It's really not for everyone, right?
No.
A job is actually a much better thing for most of the world. That being said, if you are going to pursue entrepreneurship, right? I think there's a few things that make us entrepreneurs who we are, right? And so there's sort of like these three gates I see that people typically go through, right? The first thing is, as an entrepreneur, we typically see a problem, a challenge, or a gap in the marketplace, right? It might be, in my case, often it's, a need I have in my own business, right? And so I want to find a way to fill that, and that ends up being the next business. That's pretty common, right? But as an entrepreneur, we see that something could be better, right? So that's one. The rest of the world might just pass on by and accept something for as it is. We see that it could be better. The second thing is we see a solution. We have an idea on how to fix whatever that problem is, right? Where some of the world might see the problem, they'll complain about it, right? But they won't actually think of a way to solve that. But the third is the most important and most critical, is that successful entrepreneurs, we do something about it, right? We not only do we feel empowered to take action on implementing that solution, we actually go ahead and get it done.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the world might see the problem, might even see a solution. They'll talk about that and wish for it and want it, but not actually action on that, right? So as successful entrepreneurs, we see the opportunity, we see a solution, and then we do something about it. And by the time you're that far along, well, you're an action taker, right? You're actually getting things done, right? And so then if that vision is big enough, right? If you know why it is you're doing what you're doing, those bumps and setbacks along the way are merely bumps and setbacks. And whenever we see any of those bumps and setbacks, there's a few good things that help to, push and pull us forward. One of those is the community you're talking about, right? Having other like-minded individuals that you surround yourself with who can help you along the journey is huge, right? Secondly, I always, find comfort in the fact that whether it's a challenge in, parenting, in a relationship, in, finance and business, in whatever category of your life, rest assured, as special as you think you are, and you are special, somebody else has faced the same challenge before, and they've found a way through it, and you can too. And if you can find others who've been through that challenge before, boy, are you going to be in for a world of support and resources and everything else that you need.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have kids, by the way?
Yeah, we have 2 kids.
So what's the dynamic shift with running a business with kids versus being single or just newly married?
Well, there's I think a common belief that I don't entirely agree with, right? And I think you and I are very much on the same page on this. And that is, there's this whole hustle mentality, this idea that if you launch a business, you've got to be working 90 hours a day, 17 days a week, right? And we all know that's like impossible.
Yeah.
Right? So whether it's, running a business or parenting, and we'll stick with just those two, you could throw your health in there, any of these things, right? If you put 23 hours a day in on one of those, there's more you could be doing. You could be doing 24. But the reality is you can't put 24 hours a day into all parts of your life. So if we go with that understanding, we can now back down and say, well, what is enough, right? So at some point, you've got to cut off how much time you're putting into something and do that intentionally and recognize that that's okay. So the hustle mentality says you can always be doing more, and you should be kept up at night and stressed out about the fact that you're not doing enough, and that while you're sleeping, your competition is out there taking your clients and, eating your business for lunch. And yeah, while you're not working on your business, someone else is doing stuff, and that's fine. But that fear shouldn't drive you. You shouldn't be, building your business out of fear. So are you living your life to support your business, right? Or are you building a business that supports your life? If we fast forward and look at 2 different points in your life, right? One, the bigger arc of your own life, we're all going to the same place, right? We all have this end that's the same.
Yep.
So what we do between now and then, wouldn't it be nice if we had some agency in that? Wouldn't it be nice if we decide how we spend that time? No one lies on their deathbed and looks up at their loved ones and in their last dying breath says, I wish I'd worked more.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, how do we want to spend our time? Well, let's look at your business, right? Your business is only going to end up at the end of its life in one of 3 ways, right? One is you'll pass your business on to your kids. If we ask ourselves in our heart of hearts, are we really building a business to pass on to our kids? And if you think you are, then ask the question of, do your kids really want your business? Like for real?
Exactly.
And then if they do, is that really how it's going to go? The answer is almost guaranteed to be no.
Yeah.
Yes, there are some businesses that are multi-generational. It's exceedingly rare and it's probably not your business. So, all right, let's put that one aside. The second direction it can go is you run the business into the ground or you just close up shop.
Yep.
The reality is that is where almost all businesses go.
Yep.
Right? You build a business and at some point you just decide to take that open sign and turn it to closed, put up a sign on the door, and you're out of business. That is where almost all businesses go. And is that like exciting? Is that the vision that you have for your business, to build something to shut it down? Probably not. So that leaves us with our third option, which is you build a business to sell it. So if we're building a business to sell it, then we can do a whole lot of things differently. Now we can look at, well, what makes our business saleable, right? And if your business is you working 90 hours a week, how exciting is that for someone to buy? So if we build a business around systems and people and have the business not be entirely dependent upon you, you have a much more exciting business to sell. And you start getting back some of that time. So you have a business, an income producing asset that supports the life you want today.
It's funny because with my other business, ProMash, right now, we're going through the same situation, asking the question of, what do we want to do? Where's the exit, right? How do we want to sustain the business? How long do we want to keep it? And then what do we need to enforce in order to eventually profit and benefit for the team and for us? And there's something called a founder's curse. You know what that is?
Go on.
So the founder's curse is, the more valuable the founder is to the business, the less valuable the business is.
Right.
And that's a scary proposition because most entrepreneurs drive their business to the ground because they're the ones that are operating the business. They're working in the business, not on the business. And they can't take, a good rule of thumb is, can you take 30 days, go to Europe, not check your phone, come back, and your business is still alive? If you can do that, that's a good winning situation, right?
That exact question, the way you put that, is a question I very commonly ask folks. If you want to define the difference between working, between being self-employed and having a real business, I always ask, like, if you stepped away from your business for a day, a week, a month, a quarter, right? And you came back, would you be out of business? Right? Would your business be the same or would it be better?
And that's how you know if it's a valuable business or not, right? And so Ryan Deiss has a great book called Get Scalable. Any entrepreneur should be reading that book. There's other books like E-Myth and others, and it's all about process and systems, and I'm sure things that you do and work with other entrepreneurs on. And you're right, there's 24 hours in a day, and if you're going to do anything outside of your business, because there's 80 hours a day of work. So if you're going to do anything, you got to figure out, how do I focus? How do I create systems and process to allow me to spend time on other aspects of my life other than the business? And, it's funny because I'll never forget, there was an interview with Charlie Rode, I think. He was interviewing Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. And they're talking about efficiency and focus. And Bill Gates turns to Charlie and he says, my calendar for the longest time was filled in 5-minute increments. 24 hours a day. I knew when I was sleeping. I knew when I was eating. It was full. And then I met Warren, and he's a billionaire. And I said, well, let me look at your technological calendar. And he takes out a little notepad. And Bill looks at it. He's like, damn thing is empty. It's like one meeting here, one meeting there. And it showed Bill that if you're focused, if you really pay attention to what matters most, you don't need to have a calendar that is full all day. You can take some time off. Now, I'm still learning it, but maybe one day we'll see where that goes. So, so you look like a fit guy. I've heard in the rumor mill that you're an avid cyclist. Is that still correct?
Yep.
So I always like to have these metaphors at least explained. Cycling, and it's a fantastic sport, really difficult. I wouldn't be able to do it, but cycling in particular, it feels like it could be a metaphor for entrepreneurship. We have endurance, we have setbacks, we have breakthroughs. What lessons have you taken from the road that you can apply to business, or maybe you can present to some budding entrepreneurs and give them some life lessons here?
The parallels are many, especially, in endurance cycling, right? When you're out on a longer bike ride, you generally are going to face some hills and some climbs, and sometimes they're long. And sometimes you don't know when it's going to end. And sometimes when you think you're near the top, you're not. And sometimes when you think it couldn't get any harder, it does. And when you think the conditions are bad, they get worse, right? So like these things all happen. And the parallels are just so many. Like this could be an entire book in and of itself. But let's jump into a few of them, right? So one is that if you know what the bigger objective is, then you work towards that. One of my friends likes to always say, cycling is just one pedal stroke after the other, right? So all you have to do is get that next half a turn and then repeat that again and again and again. And that's all it takes to get up the hill is you just one pedal stroke after the other. You just keep that going. And if you don't unclip, if you're clipped into your cycling cleats, if you don't unclip, you just keep that pedal stroke going and you'll get to where it is that you want to be. And that's hugely powerful. Now, if you don't have a plan, right, that's really different. I know, I also dabble in running. I run a few times a week. And, if I don't have a plan and I'm just going out for a run and I'm not feeling it, which by the way is often on a run.
Yeah.
You can get out the door and you start and you start asking yourself questions like, what the heck am I doing? Why don't I just turn around and go back home? Right? A warm cup of coffee, at home with the family sounds a lot better than whatever it is I'm doing right now. But you keep at it. You keep heading where you're going. And the next thing you know, you get into it and you find your way. But when you've got a plan, when I've got a route planned out ahead of time, that never comes up because I've laid out the roadmap. I know there's a certain route I want to do. And I'm not going to turn back on that because there is a plan to execute. And so you create the plan, you execute it. And that applies in business as well. When you know your roadmap and you know your plan, you're not waking up each day and asking yourself, I don't know, what should I do today? You're not dealing with the fires of the day, right? Everything is within context of the bigger plan, the vision, the thing that you're working on. So have your plan and work that plan. And that can help keep you from, the firefighting. So when you have your plan and you know what it is you want to do, having others along the journey is hugely helpful. I know for myself personally, as in many others, the idea of just getting out there and going for a run on your own is vastly different than meeting up with some friends.
Yep.
So I have a few group rides that I organize or I participate in, in a given week. And, you don't question, gee, should I show up to this thing that I organized, right? You don't question, gee, should I go to the thing I agreed to go to with my friends or not? You go to it because you committed to doing it, right? Others are expecting you and counting on you, and it's more enjoyable with others, right? So in business, surround yourself with others on that same journey, other entrepreneurs who get it, right? Who can be there to cheer you on and support you along the way. Look, sometimes on a ride, you're having an off day, right? You're towards the back of the pack. And it's nice when there's a friend to keep you company. Or you're screaming down, on a flats and everyone's pacelining really tight together. And you're doing everything you can to just, to pull the group, and someone comes around in front, takes the lead, and you get to grab a wheel and recover and still maintain that pace, recovering in their draft, right? So having friends helps you move along. And there are many times we've set some, great records going along as a group, cycling through a pace line, right? Everyone taking their turn pulling. And you get to maintain that velocity and speed and share that work among a group and go faster and farther than you ever could on your own because you're there as a group and not just on your own. And so all this stuff, again, in business is you don't need to go at it alone. You can share that load with others, right? You can commit to others and have others commit to you and get a lot more done together and enjoy the journey a lot more too.
Yeah, it's something you said was really poignant. Yes, going with others is way easier, more motivating, and at times can be the right move, but a lot of times you're on your own. And what you said was many times you're not going to feel like it, right? Going out for a run, doing that hard task for the business happened to me today. I wake up really early and I have my routine, and the first hour is about meditation and breathing and mindfulness, et cetera. And then right after I do that, then it's time to work out for an hour. And I can't tell you how many times your mind plays tricks on you and it just starts. Oh, you're nice and warm. Just take another nap. You can just go back to bed. And it's so hard to take that next step. Now, I don't take that next step all the time. There's a percent of time that I actually go back to bed because it's just your mind wins. But if you can convince your mind to do that hard thing, I think folks would find so much more success in their life because for the
Yeah.
most part, they just give up. That's the thing.
Well, and the understanding your why, that vision part is so important. Like, I never think about like going to the gym or working out. Like, to me, those aren't part of something bigger, right? I get the benefit of exercise and fitness, but not because I want to exercise, right?
Yeah.
I'm going out for a ride because there's a bigger purpose to that. And I get the benefit of it being exercise. On Mondays, I meet up with friends and we have what I call our not leg day, because, my legs get a workout every single day. So the gym day of lifting is really, all upper body, right? So it's our not leg day, but I run there. And so my friend runs from the opposite direction. We meet up somewhere on the trail halfway and finish up the run. He turns around and I continue straight. And it's great. And I view that as my way of getting to the gym, not just I have to go for a run or I need a workout. I'm already getting a workout in. It's social, it's fun, it's fresh air, it's outdoors. It's a way of getting from point A to point B and so on. But, I find if there's a race or an event or something on the calendar, all the fitness and training lines up to support that. Because there's now something bigger there. It's not just this, my doctor said I should do this or I'm supposed to or whatever else. It's training for something specific. So, for folks who want to, have more running or cycling or whatever in your life, go sign up for an event. Put something in your calendar that you're working towards. And then suddenly your training plan can be in support of that bigger thing you want to do. And get others to join you on that journey. It's a lot more fun. In the same way in business, especially for newer businesses, there's often not a big vision. You start doing something and you're getting clients and you're getting work and people are buying your stuff and you're in this firefighting mode of, running a business, and it's very reactive. But if you step back and figure out what it is you're building and why you're building that, well, now you can make more intentional decisions and do more of that work on your business instead of just the day-to-day work in your business.
Yeah. It seems like mental resilience is obviously required for any success, but it seems like you got that down packed. What practice or habit that you've developed over time that you think had the biggest impact on your mental resilience as you navigate through not just your entrepreneurial journey, but just in life in general?
Yeah. A piece that I touched on earlier, this idea that, whatever challenge you're facing, others have been there before, and you can leverage that tribal wisdom we have, right? So, when my wife and I started a family, not only did we read up a ton on, pregnancy and birthing and early, child rearing, all these kinds of things, we, were in a bunch of different groups and we met some, lifelong friends from that. These are other parents who are also beginning that same journey, who also value that education and who also value the community and so on. So it was a group of people who are really intentional about, being parents and being great parents, right? So that was, a wonderful network. For business, I've, been parts of mastermind groups for decades, right? Surrounding myself with other individuals who are also intentional and want to be part of a community of other entrepreneurs and business owners. And the number of times that, we've leaned on these support groups, over the decades is huge. Right? When you're facing a challenge, to share that with others and know it's okay to share a challenge and others can be there to support you is powerful. To provide resources, to talk you through it is really big. I mean, to know that you can be vulnerable there. On the flip side, it's a great place to share your big successes and wins, right? It's a safe place to share what's going really well and know that others are going to celebrate you and be happy for you and be there with you in that success as well, instead of cutting you down or criticizing it or downplaying it or whatever else might happen, right? So these communities are so, so powerful. And that's been so impactful for me in business and life and, in all these different areas.
Interesting. You're speaking of masterminds. I was one of the next topics that I wanted to cover because I was introduced to masterminds through Russell Brunson, Tony Robbins. And I've always felt a lot of folks look at masterminds as a cost, not an investment, right? Oh, it's $50,000 for the year and you get a mastermind and I can't do that, right? Meanwhile, they'll spend money elsewhere.
Right.
Mastermind groups obviously are a huge part of your work. The question is, what inspired you to create the Bay Area Masterminds? What do you do there? What's the niche? And how have you seen it impact the entrepreneurs that you've been working with?
Yeah, so I've been a part of mastermind groups for decades and seen firsthand just how powerful that can be. And yeah, just like you're talking about, there are groups where, I remember there was one higher end group I was joining where I was handing over, the largest check I'd ever written for my business. And I remember having this paper check in my hand. And the person who's running the group had made me some promises about the benefits I would get from joining that group. And I was looking at it just like you were talking about from this ROI standpoint of like, okay, I hand over this enormous check. What I'm being promised that'll come out as a multiple of that ROI. Like, if I trust that, then this is a good investment, not just an expense. And so I remember, both my hands are on that check and both his hands are on that check. And I finally let go and, exhaled as I hand that check over. And the short version of the story is I never got what I was promised from that group. The big thing that I thought I'd be getting from that did not materialize at all. What I did get, though, was so much more impactful, right? So a few things. One is, I had this business idea that came up and that would fill a need in one of my businesses. And within that mastermind group, I was able to back of the envelope, sketch the idea out and ask some of the folks in the room if this made sense. And basically, I was able to very quickly shop my MVP idea around to other folks who knew business really well. And I was able to get some very quick early feedback. In fact, got some very quick, immediate early beta testers for the idea I had. So I was able to take this little seed of an idea, incubate it within that group very quickly, launched my MVP of that business. And from day one to the point, when I say day one, like the day we took on our first expenses for that business, day one have new paying customers supporting that new business. And that was really powerful because, like almost all my businesses that started, cash flow positive from day one. And that's a multi-million-dollar business. That all came from the ideas and conversations and expertise that I had behind the closed doors of that group. So I'm forever grateful for that opportunity to not get what I paid for, right? Because instead I got, that new business launch. And that was one of many businesses that, that started that way, right? Secondly, I never thought to value this as much as I do now, later in life. The connections and the friendships that came from that group. I'm not a person who answers my phone. Since my first cell phone in the 90s, the ringer has been off. Right? I've never had a ringtone.
You're a smart man.
Right? I've never heard my phone ring. I don't even know what they sound like nowadays. But when I see the face of one of the people who's behind those doors, the mastermind group with me on my phone, like those are the calls I take. Those are the people I get back to because those are the people that, I was in the trenches with and that I have these lifelong relationships with. The consulting arrangements and the clients I've received from behind those closed doors have been huge. So again, multiple times over in multiple ways have multi-million-dollar businesses come from being behind those closed doors. And that is not at all what I would have expected. And if you told me, Jeremy, being in a mastermind group, you'll get business ideas and you'll get contacts, I would have said, feh, I can't put that on a financial spreadsheet and show the ROI on that. And now I realize just how powerful that is. So anyways, those are just some of the ways that mastermind groups have been so impactful to me. So I learned over the years, there's all these different formats of groups, right? There's your informal sort of accountability groups. You get together once a week on a conference call or in a coffee shop. You might pay next to nothing to be parts of these groups. And, there's some benefit to that, but they're not the greatest format for a mastermind group.
Yeah.
On the other end of these higher end destination groups, like you and I were talking about, right? You get together a few times a year, typically somewhere, that you're traveling to. And those are typically 5 to 6 figure a year groups that you're part of. If you miss a group, well, it might be 9 months between meetings. And you might have an entirely new business by the time you see folks again. So sort of the meeting frequency and cadence is almost too far apart.
Yeah.
In those. So really the sweet spot we found, and this is what we've dialed in for the Bay Area Mastermind, is the once a month meeting cadence of getting together with business owners once a month to spend one day working on your business and really diving into what's working, what's not working, and where you need help. And what I found is so powerful about these mastermind groups in whatever format you've got, but ideally sort of the sweet spot that I've figured out there, is that everyone comes into the room with their own superpower, their own expertise, the stuff that you know, right? The things that come easy for you that are difficult for others. Everyone also comes into the room, and typically why they find me is there's something that they know they don't know, right? You're feeling stuck. You've got a big burning question, something keeping you up at night, right? So this is something you don't know. But when you don't know something, you can search online for answers, right?
Yeah.
You can find books, you can take courses, you can seek out, experts, consultants, and coaches. You can find a mastermind group, you can find me, right? You've got a question, you don't know something. So those are the two things people bring into the room. But the third category, that's where all the magic is. And that's the things that you don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? That was those new business ideas that I was sharing, right? That launched entirely new businesses, right? These are hearing from others about sales channels they have in their business that you didn't even know existed. This is when you hear what other business owners are doing that's working for them that you didn't even know to look into because you didn't even know it existed, right? So how do you find out about things you don't know? That's where intentionally putting yourself in a room with others who are on that same journey is so powerful. And that's where you get what I call that cross-pollination of ideas between members. From those conversations, being a fly on the wall and hearing what others are up to, the challenges they're facing, the successes they're having, that's where all those big breakthroughs and pivots happen again and again and again.
Is there a specific sweet spot or a cohort that you're after with your masterminds? Who do you suspect is kind of the ideal client of yours?
Yeah, so let me answer that in two parts. And it's a really good question, right? So broader, for really any mastermind group, you want to make sure that you're in a room of what I call lifelong learners, right? So part of our we have a pretty stringent application process. And part of what we're looking for is like, what are you reading? What books have been impactful to you, right? What events and conferences do you go to? What experts and authors do you follow, right? These are all signs of folks who are lifelong learners. There's some terrifying statistic for the number of Americans that the last book they read was in high school, right? Most folks have big TV screens and like no libraries, right? We're looking for folks who have big libraries. These are folks who are always sharpening the sword and bettering themselves. That's a really, really good sign. Those are the folks you want to hang out with, right? The second thing that we're looking for, this is really where all my work for my entire career has been empowering other entrepreneurs, right? Who have existing businesses, who are post-revenue, right? Who have scaled and are now feeling stuck or plateaued, right? And they want to get unstuck and continue to grow. So founders are people who are looking to start a business, right? Like those are not really a fit for the mastermind groups that I run, but I seem to attract a fair amount of those folks anyway. So, over the past few years, we actually created a community for our founders as well that's separate from our mastermind group. And really the big differences that I've found are our mastermind groups are for people who are actively at it. They're running a business. They're seeing success, failure. They're sharing what's working, what's not, right? And they're learning from that. Contrast that to our founders. They are not doing it yet, and they want to. So they have more how do I questions, and they're looking for guidance, for mentorship, and so on, right? They want to understand how to start. Whereas our mastermind group members, they're actively doing it and are sharing those best practices. So we can have a one-way mentor-mentee relationship between those, but the founders don't bring that same value to the mastermind group. So that's why we have a separate community for them. Wow. So really my sweet spot, the folks I bring the most value to and can help out with are established scaling business owners who are post-revenue. You've got a product, you have a team, whether it's a part-time VA or a dozen employees, you've got people supporting you and you understand the value of that. We don't need to sell you on the benefits of not being a solopreneur.
Yes.
And you're hitting some plateau, you're feeling stuck, or you're seeing the top of that S curve and you don't like how that looks, right? That's where we can apply a lot of strategies that I've helped clients with for dozens of years in your own business and help you to get unstuck and to, increase not just, the gross sales, but profitability in the business and to start to pull you back from that business so you can grow.
Fascinating. And you're doing such good work. You come very highly referenced everywhere I see videos and folks speak about you. They always say some incredible things about you. So, Jeremy, how quickly time flies. I always like to close out my interviews with the following question. Who did you have to stop being, and who did you need to become to manifest your current success?
Yeah, it's funny. We so often talk about all the habits we should have, right? We talk about all the things we should start doing, but no one ever talks about taking the time to discuss what you should stop doing, the things that don't serve us anymore. And sometimes when we stop doing things, it makes room for the things we want to start doing.
Yep.
So it's a beautiful question you have. So I remember a pivotal moment back early on when my wife and I were first dating. This was like probably our second date. And there I am sitting across the table from her, and I've got, my cell phone next to me. And I'm tuned into what she's saying, but I'm also mindful of if a client is calling or someone needs me. So I'm like, half my mind is tuned into her, but I'm also mindful of what the business might need at any given moment. And I still remember that dinner, sitting across the table from her and suddenly realizing like what a bad idea that was. And, the realization was like, here I am sitting across from this, beautiful, amazing woman who I'm getting to know, who's sharing with me about who she is. And I'm only half tuned into that. Like, what is wrong with me? Right. And I had no idea that, fast forward, she'd be, my amazing wife, mother to my kids, partner in life and all of this. This was just, someone I'm on a second date with here. But it was in that moment I decided to not tune into my cell phone off hours and to retrain my clients that if you reach out after hours, you'll hear back from me the next day. But, off hours, I'm simply not available. And so I had to stop being that guy who was always available to clients, to team members, and all those things, and become that person who had boundaries on his time and who said, hey, outside of quote, quote, business hours, I'm not available. And wouldn't you know it, clients had no problem with that and actually respected that, which I think is shocking to many folks who feel they need to be around 24/7. It also meant that I could be 100% present with the person I was with, which was hugely powerful. It meant that my team had to understand that off hours, I wasn't around and that, I entrusted them to make the right decision. And that was, growing up for, myself, for clients, for team members and so on, but it was so the right move and so powerful. And if you fast forward to when we started our family, I remember the phone call I was on with my team where thankfully, I had wisely hired people smarter than I was that were more experienced than I was. And I was sharing the news with them that, we were expecting our first kid. And, after all the congratulations from my, my wiser team members, most of whom were parents, and here I was soon to be a first-time parent. After all the congratulations, they asked me the next question, which was, how much time I was going to be taking off. And I hadn't really thought about it because, my whole life, I show up, I get the work done, I do what needs to happen, and, I run my businesses, right? I hadn't, I just figured I'd be around, I'd be taking care of my kid, but I'd also be, present in the business. And they smartly told me I should take time off. So we decided I'd take 3 months off, which was a wonderful idea. And they then laid out for me that, here are the systems we needed, the hires we needed to make, and the knowledge that I had that no one else did that we needed to put down on paper and have in place. And we had like a 6-month runway to do that. So we got that all done. And then, when we welcomed our daughter into this world, I was able to have, those first few months fully present with my wife and my daughter, not thinking about the business, not looking at text messages, not checking email, right? Being fully offline and fully present. And that is time I'll never, ever get back. You can never get that time back in your life.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to my team for recognizing that and seeing that need. And we did that again when my son was born. And then just this past summer, we were traveling for 9 weeks as a family, and I was pretty much offline that entire time. I mean, this is something we do often. We're very often, intentionally present with family or the people we're with and not tuned into what's going on in the business because we put the right systems and people in place to allow us to do that. And that is something that I've done, it's something my clients do, and it's something our dear listeners that you can do as well.
Yeah, it's a dream. And I think that if we can get there, these are such wise words. So, Jeremy, how could the Seven Hatters find you? What do you want to tell them? Anything that's going on right now that you feel is interesting?
Yeah. So you can find more about me, articles that where we dive deeper into a lot of the topics we're discussing today. All that's over at bayareamastermind.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Jeremy Shapiro on LinkedIn. And if some of these topics are of interest in terms of, the work that I do in helping clients to not just increase the gross revenues, but also profitability in their business and reclaim some of that time back, a lot of that is going into a new book I'm working on, and that's all over at bayareamastermind.com/book. So I encourage you to check that out as well. You can get on that sort of pre-launch list and and get some of the resources I'm sharing along that process as well there too.
I'll check out the book. Also, look up Jeremy on YouTube. There are plenty of videos with some wise wisdom. Jeremy, you've added a host of nuggets to this episode. Thank you so much for gracing us on the Seven Hats. It was wonderful to speak with you. And I hope we could do this again one of these days.
Love it. Thank you. Love the Seven Hatter community we've got going on, and I appreciate you inviting me on. Thank you.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jeremy. Let's end today with a show segment that I refer to as, What Can We Hang Our Hat On? And here is my takeaway. Jeremy's story is a powerful reminder that entrepreneurship isn't just about building a business, but a life worth living. And yet, so many of us fall into this dreaded founder's curse, that suffocating trap where the more indispensable we are, the less valuable our business becomes without us. This is the mistake that I made when I launched my first business, Luvala. It nearly destroyed me and, unfortunately, destroyed the business. Influencers on LinkedIn and Instagram tell us that the key to success is to work harder, grind longer, and sacrifice more. But what they don't tell you is that grind culture is a silent thief. It steals your health, your relationships, and, ironically, the very success you're chasing. I hit the top of the mountain realizing it was a ledge, and I had nowhere to go but down. And I know I'm not alone in that. Jeremy's journey highlights a brutal truth. If you can't step away from your business for 30 days without it falling apart, you don't own a business, you own a job. But here's the thing, success doesn't have to be a prison. Jeremy found his way out through masterminds, mentorship, and systems that allowed him to scale his businesses without becoming their prisoner. And that's what I want to leave you here with today. You don't have to do this alone. Surround yourself with the people who challenge you, support you, and force you to think bigger than just your next task, your next fire to put out, or your next milestone. So ask yourself, are you designing a business that gives you freedom? Or are you just building a more expensive set of golden handcuffs? If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. You have a choice. You can keep grinding until you collapse, or build something that allows you to step away, breathe, and enjoy the success you fought for. I want to thank Jeremy once again for his wisdom and for sharing his story with us. And if you found this episode valuable, please subscribe, share, and help grow the Seven Hats community. Let's keep learning and growing together. And until next time, my name is Yuval Selik, and I tip my hat to you.